Why do you want them to listen to your podcast?
So that when they think about starting a business, they've got the content that is pointing them in the right direction.
That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
The change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars. How are you going, Matt?
I'm very well, thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me.
No worries. We've had you in the dungeon before, and it's good to get you back in. Yeah, for people wondering who you are, it's on your hat, but Matthew Wandmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Blue Ridge. Is it Blue Ridge Property Services?
Property maintenance. Yep.
Property maintenance, right. Don't mind me. Blue Ridge Property Maintenance. You're in Melbourne, and people need to go back and search your name if they want to hear the story of Matthew Wandmaker. But we just touched on that briefly. You started as a gyms franchise and then you left them after a few years?
Correct, yeah. So we started with gyms back in 2011 and we developed the business right through to, I think it was 2017, 18 that we moved away from gyms and developed the Blue Ridge.
Yeah. And from what I understand, it's all positive. You've got very positive comments about your time with gyms. It was something you were happy to do, but you reached a point where it was time to break away from gyms just simply because you've grown your business that far.
Yeah, 100%. So I love gyms. Gyms was a great franchise model, and I promote that to everyone that I talk to. It worked well for us. I got to the ability where I was running 3 franchises at one point, and then also was doing a lot of the operational training at head office, which I loved. But it just got to the point where, we decided to move into that commercial space, and gyms just wasn't in that space at the time.
Fair enough. So you got to the point where you'd outgrown gyms. They weren't offering you the same advantages at that point as what they were when you started.
Correct, yeah. At the end of the day, I was just paying to have gym sticker on the side of my trailer or my T-shirt, which, again, not a problem because that's what I signed for, but it was time to move on.
We might come back and touch a bit more on gyms later because most of what we're going to focus on in this interview is drawing out your wisdom from what you've learned growing your business over the years. I wanted to focus on the idea that teams are a better pathway than operating on your own or having multiple people working for you, but they all operate independently on their own. One of the first things I wanted to talk about is to recognise that there are some inefficiencies and some problems with working in teams. So one of the first things, and I think Luke Smith touched on this years ago when he had a bit of a rant about teams, it's that you've got a lot of unbillable hours when you've got 2 people sitting in a truck driving in between jobs.
And unfortunately, he's correct. You do. You've got 2 people, 3 people in a truck driving between jobs, and if there's a long time distance between jobs, then he's correct. There are the unbillable hours, but from my point of view, it's what's the word? The necessary evil. If you're looking to, well, I'll go back to what we did. So we started, like I said, with gyms back in 2011. Within the year, we put on a first employee, which is the biggest hurdle to overcome. The reason we put on the second employee, or I put on the second employee, and this was to go out on his own. So we weren't working in together at this point in time. We were separate, and it was so he could actually pick up a run and run it on his own. And he did that and did it very well. What we found, though, was that there was too much of a disconnect between myself and him at that point in time. So we talked during the day, but not overly. And then at the end of the day, you sort of, you say, thanks for coming in, and you go.
Yeah.
If we move further on into the business, we then put a second person on, an apprentice, to work with Andy, and that was the best thing we ever did. So you talk about unbillable hours. With the apprentice, there was a fair bit of unbillable hours to start with because there was a lot of mistakes and training, and that was expected. But the young kid was really awesome. His name was Travis. Yeah. What happened then is once they gelled, the workload that came out of those 2 working together compared to a solo. And I find that'll always be different because you can only do so much on your own. With the two people together, provided they know what they're doing, they got so much more work done and more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah. So you tried with Andy to start with on his own. And I think that's a bit of a unicorn where you can actually find somebody that's going to be your employee that you can trust to send out on their own and know that they're actually going to do what they're meant to do. And even so, you're saying it still had its challenges, but he was actually well-intentioned and striving to do what you needed.
100%. So it was, we went out with him at the start. Sorry, I keep saying we. I went out with him at the start, trained him up, and did all those things. But I'll be honest with you, it was a very quick process, and we more or less threw the keys and said, right, you're on your own, off you go. Andy is definitely a unicorn. He's very good. He's very meticulous. He's very loyal. He's still with me today, and he's actually one of my he's my 2IC basically. And so is Travis, the apprentice that Andy trained. So he's now a crew leader within the business, and he runs a team. So, it's quite diverse.
Yeah, so those challenges when you're trying to grow from being solo to making sure you can take on more work than you can do on your own, they're going to make it hard for the majority of people in our industry to actually grow their business. And there's a bunch of different issues that will come about as a result of that. It's generally off-putting for people. I've been through this phase which I refer to affectionately as grow, shrink, grow, shrink, grow, shrink. You go, all right, it's busy, let's put on an employee. Oh, it's quiet, let's get rid of the employee. It's busy, let's put on an employee. Oh, should I try and keep them busy through winter? Oh, that's going to hurt.
And it does, and I'll be honest with you, Gary. Like we're sort of talking offline before. We go up through peaks and troughs within the business, and I'll be honest with you, from my business personally at the moment, like we've hit the highs and we've done really well. We're not in a low, but we're certainly finding at the moment that things have really slowed down. So I've got a team of 14 staff that we've got to keep. Food on the table, and that's my number one priority, is to make sure they're fed every week with regards to wages and things, which we've always got covered. But if you start losing a couple of clients, which unfortunately we've had that happen over the last month, from no fault of our own, it's all been price related. It starts to really stretch the friendship with regards to, do I keep those employees on or not? So we've actually put in place and have over the last few years, where we're putting away funds and those sort of things over the good times. So over your spring months, and making sure we've got enough to get us through winter, because winter can be, in all honesty, a bit of a, I won't say it, but it's it's certainly up and down with regards to revenue.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things you look at when you've got employees: is can I keep them right through winter full time?
Correct.
Do I have a pool of casuals that I call on to keep me through the peak season, and then those casuals don't have less work and I just keep it for the permanent staff?
Yeah. So there's a couple of businesses or people that I talk to that run the casual side of things. So they have a couple of people, let's say core people, and then they use casuals over that extreme busy period, which is great. Yeah. And then they let them go over winter. I've always been and this is just me, this is the way we rerun the business, is my philosophy is if I'm going to employ someone, I want them to stay. And whether I develop them to move on to run their own business at some stage or move into another career path, which we've done for numerous people, that's where I get the satisfaction from. But when I'm putting people on, so out of those I'll just take a step back, out of those 14 staff we have, there's 2 that are part-time. One is a subcontractor who's my admin manager, so she's with us full-time, but she's elected to go as a subby. But everyone else is full-time. And I find I get a lot more commitment, a lot more loyalty back from those people. Yeah,
interesting. So I think one of the ways I've found a little bit of a unicorn example is that the more commercial work you do, the easier it is to stay on the job through winter. And my way of quoting commercial work is, I want to be on your site all year round for however many hours it needs to be, and we can fluctuate a little bit, but I want to be making sure in winter we're taking care of those things we're too busy to touch in summer, and doing the extra little things coming out of winter into the early stages of spring when the lawn is still not growing fast, so that we're prepping your property to be perfect.
100%. So that's where we're at now. So I've been on the tools for the last, what year are we? 2025. So, for the last number of years. It's really only this year that I've really actually come off the tools. So I can actually do exactly what you're talking about, is to make sure that the guys are busy the right way through. So winter, spring, summer, autumn, but particularly winter. So on those commercial sites, I'm out there visiting sites and going through lists of things that we need to be doing, or the guys may have dropped the ball or something along those lines, or re-quoting extra soft landscaping and stuff like that. So it's important.
Yeah, it's definitely important, isn't it, to make sure that's taken care of. So we've touched on some pros and cons of why you would or wouldn't put people into teams. One of the things we haven't really talked about is the fact that when you've gone down that path, you can establish some clear roles and clear expectations with people. But if you set you mentioned Andy is your 2IC and Travis is a team leader. So those two roles in themselves are setting your business up to take care of people that are in teams, because once you have a bit of hierarchy in the teams, it helps to foster that team spirit of we're all working together. The people that are leading out are more inclined to help the people that need help, and also put a little bit of accountability back on people. So if you've got somebody slacking off in one of the teams, they get picked up on it fairly quickly, hopefully in a positive way, not just old school tradie style.
No, well, you're 100% correct. So by having and we did this purposely, we put a team leader in each truck, and then a gardener or a labourer or whatever you want to call it, that sits beside them. And that, as you said, the hierarchy works really well, because I refer everything to the team leader, and then they can refer everything back down to wherever it needs to go in terms of delegation and things like that. What I have found is that I do not micromanage my staff, and never will. And I think that's an important thing. Just listening to or reading some of the things through the LMCA websites and things like that, is that people think they can manage until they have to manage. And then you see a lot of attrition with staff, and there's a lot of issues with I can't find anyone that's suitable and things like that. I've advertised. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I've advertised through Seek, Indeed, everywhere. I've paid thousands and thousands of dollars. The most of my employees have come through word of mouth. In the end,
okay. Interesting.
It is, and we've been very lucky. I'll touch wood that continues, but we've been very lucky with that sort of stuff.
I think one of the number one reason people don't keep on growing their business is because they're not built to be a manager. And I talk about this fact almost every episode that I do, is when you start a lawn care business, your vision is that you're buying a job and you're buying flexibility. And I'm going to talk to Pres Madley later in the week about this and talk about mindset and the reason why you might change the way you view things.
I'm Gary Ashton, and I'm here to help business owners succeed and enjoy being in business. Does running your business feel chaotic? Maybe you started it for freedom, to live the life you wanted, but now you're stuck in the grind, overwhelmed and exhausted. The stress doesn't stop. You work harder, but nothing really changes. Get real support at Think Tank Coaching. Get crystal clear on future goals, your ideal customers, and the numbers to focus on that will move your business forward. If you're ready to make a change, let's talk. Book your free strategy session now at thinktankcoaching.com.au.
From that point of view, people come into this to replace a job. I could name on one hand the number of people that are like yourself that actually have some level of management skills in our industry that I've spoken to, and you've come in with the ability to actually manage other people, to be able to handle those decisions, and it sounds like it's still a challenge, right?
It's a daily challenge. Yes, it is.
So many people will walk away from having employees, and you see that on LMCA, like you said, like so many people put on an employee, realise that they suck as a manager, And instead
And then
of
blame the employee.
addressing their inadequacies as a manager and learning, they go, no, this is what I'm doing. Back to solo.
Yeah, and you know what? That's fine. I've got no issues with that.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys and girls have recognised that that's a fault that they may have, and have decided to go back to solo, and that's not a problem. But for those that are running people or staff, the biggest thing is you've got to treat them the way that you want to be treated, or you would want to be treated as an employee, and you need to take a step back some days and go, well, how did I find that situation when I was an employee at if I was at some stage, which I've had to reflect on a little bit myself.
Yes.
Yeah, and that goes with staff training and development and those sort of things. You really sometimes you just need to take a step back and go, well, okay, well, I've actually got to pen this out, or change my direction, or whatever the case may be, to ensure that we're getting the best out of everybody, including yourself.
Yeah. So I think what I see is I sort of like putting things in black and white. And I guess that comes with the industry, right? We like to be technicians and look at things black and white. But if I put things into black and white in this scenario, we're talking about pigeonholing this, and there's an explanation. This is the logical explanation for why people struggle with these issues. And talking about the technician, typically the first thing you do when you start a lawn care business is you learn how to make sure you're keeping your customer happy by being technical about what you're supplying as a end product for the customer. So short grass, sharp edges, or maybe some knowledge as a horticulturist if you're coming in knowing something about fertilizers or plant species, all the different things that you can wow the customer with and say, this is why you're paying me to look after your yard or your garden. People can do the same thing when it comes to being a manager, and they can learn those technical skills if they want to. Not everyone has to, like you said. You can certainly walk away and go, I want to stay solo. But there's some of those technical skills we'll cover today in terms of what it is that you want to learn when you've got employees. So you're saying treat them how you want to be treated yourself. I've made a bit of a list of some tools that are worth utilising when it comes to employees. And you add to this by all means, but I'll list them off briefly and then we can spend more time on them. So the first one I've got is in terms of helping to manage expectations and making sure expectations are clear with systems. So the first system I would have is your paperwork, your employee handbook, your employee contract, and your work health safety policy. I think those three documents are the most significant ones the employee needs to be up to speed with so that there's clear expectations about their job role.
100%. So as soon as we put someone on, they get the employee handbook, which I must admit that is an old handbook, and they sign that, they go through the contract, the employee contract, handbook, and then the health and safety. They get on their first day they have an induction where we go through all the health and safety things and tick everything off.
Yeah, and so that makes sure that they know what the expectations are. Obviously, that's something you come back around to as they're learning and go, okay, let's cover some of these things off again, or remind you that you don't use your mobile phone while you're driving a company vehicle or whatever the case may be. The other one that goes hand in hand with that I like to utilise is the award for our industry. And I think this is often underutilised because people believe that they're doing better than the award if they offer a slightly higher hourly rate. But if you actually utilise the award, you can pigeonhole your employees to suit what their capabilities are for their job role. And so, okay, you can build yourself from you're a trainee going through your 3 months probation to you're a level 1 through to level 5. And even sometimes you might say, okay, you might be a level 3, but you can get a team leader's pay for the time when you are actually in charge, or say your 2OC, when they're actually doing extra duties, they get extra pay.
100%. So I don't actually use. Well, sorry, I use the award in the business, but I don't use that particular style for my guys. But it's a great opportunity for those that are looking to put people on, like you said, to actually use the award and work out where people fit, and then have the ability to say, right, as you said, as you progress through the business, then these are the levels that you can step into and go on from there. I was going to jump in when I first put people on, when I first put Andy on as an example, we had very clear expectations in the form of funnily enough, a business plan. And I actually gave Andy that copy of the business plan. I took out all the numbers, but the actual business plan around what our intentions were, or what we wanted to do, where we saw ourselves. So he had actually a clear understanding of where we were going as a business. I actually revisited that earlier this year and brought the whole team in and went back through a business plan I set for the next 12 months. And that was actually, funnily enough, with me coming off the tools full time and all sorts of things. So I'd actually brought them all into the picture. And that's actually helped glue a lot of the guys further, more into the business, if that makes sense. It really helps them evolve and become part of the business.
I think a lot of people will shy away from this, and perhaps that, like if we've said, it's not for everyone to want to grow their business. A lot of people want to be solo and have more flexibility that they can have when they're solo. Unfortunately, you do lose some flexibility when you're solo as well, because if you're not on the job, nobody's getting paid. So you've got to be there. You've got to do work if you're solo.
Correct.
Nobody else is doing it for you. But if you have, so the 3 documents we first mentioned, add the award in there, make it 4 documents. Right? If you've got, and you mentioned a business plan as well, so make it 5 documents. They're all relevant and important documents that help you to have something written to go back to the employees and say, these are written expectations, both directions, of me as a business owner, you as an employee. And if you don't have them in writing, if you've sat down with your employee and say, hey, look, I'm going to pay you more than the award, but you don't have the award sitting in front of them, how do they actually know that you're being honest and open and clear with the expectations? If you say, hey, don't smoke in the company truck, but then 6 months' time you notice them smoking in the company truck, sure, you can say, hey, we talked about this. But if it's in writing, it's so much easier to go back and say, hey, we've had this conversation. You signed the employee contract to say you're following the employee handbook. Let's have a chat.
Correct. Yep. This is your first warning.
Yep. Whereas if you don't have the documents, then the expectations get pretty muddy pretty quickly.
Best way to think about that, if you're looking to put employees on, if you haven't got a written quote that you've sent to a customer, then how are they going to pay you the right amount?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not rocket science. So if it's not in writing, then generally, you don't have a leg to stand on.
Look, I've seen this with customers, and I think it's important that you've connected the dots between customers and employees in that sense of having clear expectations. But I've seen this with small businesses where there's the broad spectrum. So I go to a new customer, say, look, I can do your lawn care, I can make your long grass short. I'm going to turn up every fortnight while it's growing and less when it's not growing. Handshake, that's the contract, right? That works. But I've seen the other end of the spectrum, and good friend up in Queensland, Jack Hamilton, he'll know who he is. His contract with the customer that he puts in the quote, this is the contract you agree to if you go ahead with the quote. And it includes things like glass breakage is the customer's responsibility. And I thought,
yeah, right.
That's controversial, but it's in the contract. The customer's signed a contract to say, okay, that's my responsibility. I don't want to be a customer if I don't want that responsibility, or I'm happy because this guy's thought it through. Sign up. We know what we're signing up for.
I don't know. And if it's in the contract and people are happy to pay for it, then so be it. It's like putting together and I think there's a guy I think it's WA, Applerich. I think it is Applerich.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name. Yeah, he puts together his lawn maintenance contracts and for the next 12 months, and from what I understand, and they're great.
Yeah. And I think you can go as far or as little as you want, but if you're putting it in writing like that and you're putting in the things that are important, then you and the customer or you and the employee have very clear written expectations. You can easily go back to the document and say, well, this is what we agreed on. Was there something outside of this we need to talk about? Hopefully there's not too much that comes up outside of that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and look, one of the things I've found with all my my staff management over the 20 odd years that I've been doing it through various roles is that you can't be their mate you can be their mate, but you can't be their mate all the time. So when it comes to business, at the end of the day, it's your house, it's your car, whatever it is on the line. When you're employing people, you need to be very clear with what you've just talked about, with your documents, with your expectations. It needs to be in writing. They need to sign an employment contract. So you've got a way out if necessary, and so do they as well. So people need to remember that they've got a way out as well. And it's about building your relationship. You've got to build the relationship, but you've got to build it as a business person, not as your best mate. So I learnt that when I was very young. I was in a gardening business. Sorry, I ran my own it was called Wandy's Mowing. It was Wandy's Mowing.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I was, making enough money for beer and cigarettes, but I picked up a contract through local council, which is an awesome contract. And my best mate was looking for work, and I said, "Oh man, come on! I'm getting $20 an hour. I'll pay you $20 an hour as well."
Yeah.
First mistake in business. I was trying to be a good mate and a good friend. I could have paid him $18 and made $2 off him, but no, I didn't, and that burnt me. So I learnt that very early on.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, right? If I put on an employee, and I think like you, I've found a lot of employees through word of mouth rather than through Seek or Indeed. And I think there's value in doing both. But you're saying mostly you've got your best employees through word of mouth. I've made the mistake of not having clear expectations there and then going, okay, what do you do when they come and say, can I have a day off? Well, if you don't have it written in a contract, what do you do? And if they're casual versus permanent, what do you do? And then if they're not turning up on the job sick without telling you, that burns you. If they know that they need to give you warning and they need to tell you, and if they're permanent, that there's a process for getting paid sick leave, it saves those lack of communication issues that come about where you end up losing friendships over it quite quickly. And I've had that situation where people who I thought, yep, they're probably a pretty good friend, give them work, and then all of a sudden it's like, hang on a minute, they are dropping the ball, and I haven't had a plan on how to deal with that.
Yeah. No, and you're 100% right. I did very early on. I made the business decision never to do work with family or friends. And you know what? Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, my father works for me, and now my brother works for me. So that worked out real well. But I'll be honest with you, we seem to be a bit of an anomaly there, and all work really well together. So, but yeah.
Well, I've found it's so much easier when you can say, hey, this is how our expectations are. And because I appreciate you, I'm giving you a bonus. Yep. Rather than, like you said, I'm going to pay you the same as what I'm getting, and then realizing that doesn't work well. It's like, no, I'll pay you what you're worth. But I'm really impressed. I'm going to give you a bonus at Christmas time or at the end of the financial year.
Yeah, no, and we do that. We do. The staff know generally now that they will generally get some sort of bonus at the end of the year. They don't know what.
Yep.
That's we've probably set that expectation now, which is more probably it's our fault. But anyway, that's perceived as what happens. But that could be anywhere from a $100 to a $500 voucher. They're not getting thousands and thousands of dollars in terms of bonuses, because as a business, we just can't float that. So.
But if they got a $500 bonus last year and this coming year they get $20,
well, that's right. There's a conversation prior to that, but So one of the things with running employees, you're right. Also, which again I've done in previous lives, but with this business we haven't done as well as we should have, and that's hand on heart. That's one of the things we probably downfall a little bit, and that's with regards to what's called performance documents. So setting proper KPIs and performance documents for the team. So we do informal catch-ups with the teams. We've got a bunch of both guys and girls. So, but in this instance, I'll just call them guys because it's easier.
Yep.
So we do informal catch-ups with the guys, but there's no written performance management document. So that hand on heart, is the wrong thing for us to be doing at the moment, and we're changing that. But so there's some of the things you've got to think about. But what I have found with running teams and staff is that you'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
They make mistakes, we make mistakes as a business, and it's an ever evolving learning thing. And one of the things I've found is that find people that are either in a similar situation or even in a better situation in terms of the business, and leverage off in those networks and really hammer them in terms of questions, providing they're willing to part with knowledge. And that's how we've actually developed and learned.
Now, another system that is worth bringing up at this point, in line with what you're talking about, I've spoken with ServiceMate last year. I've spoken with Sortscape this year, and they both have different ways they deal with this. But if you have a CRM or a scheduling software, I think most of these are more than just scheduling software, so CRM's better to adequately describe that. You put that on each phone for each employee, or I don't know, you might put it on just the team leaders' phones, I don't know. And
so, yep, I'll talk to that if you like, Gary.
That gives you an opportunity to manage your employees a little bit more too. 100%.
So we went down the ServiceMate track. I think we've been on there ever since we started. So what's that, 6-7 years ago, with Blue Ridge. And I wanted a CRM system where everyone could get onto that same system. So all employees have access. They've all been set up as staff. What I do is I send the list out so I sort of set up the rosters for the team for the following week. The team leaders have that. In fact, everybody's got access to it. The team leaders actually then, I let them do their thing, and they'll swap and change things during the week to better suit what they think is going to work better. So again, that CRM system is just, when you're running more than sort of, my opinion, others may differ, more than sort of two people, you need some form of a system, whether it's app based or whatever, where you can monitor and track, and you can upload files, you can upload knowledge documents, all sorts of things onto the CRM system. MSDSs, whatever you.
I think the very basics of a CRM is scheduling, but that scheduling allows you as the business owner to estimate how much time the employees should be spending on each job. And that allows you to then plan for future schedules. So if you then attach to the scheduling a stop-start recording for the employees, so you get live data reporting from the amount of time they spend on the job, that allows you to better schedule in the future. But it also allows you to come back with the employees and say, hey, took you 18 minutes to do this job, but for some reason you slacked off and it's taken half an hour at the moment. Or slack off might be a little bit too harsh on them even. Like, what's the story? Why is it taking us so much longer? Is Judy making you sit down for donuts and jam, or what's going on?
Correct. Yep. 100%. So we've actually been caught out the other way, believe it or not, with this particular, with the CRM, because we take before and after photos at every site.
Good.
And with the lack of growth at the moment down here, or has been for a while, the guys are getting through, because there's always two. In fact, there's been three in this particular truck for a short period of time. So they're getting through, an hour job in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're now getting questioned by the client. Oh, well, why is it taking so long? Why isn't it's only taking you 20 minutes? Getting it so quick. So you've got, so I'm on the flip side.
That's an interesting topic, right? Because like you said, there's reasons. The grass is not growing as quick. You've got 3 people on the job instead of 2 people on the job. There's lots of reasons why this might come about, but it is one of those markers which a customer will look at and go, if you're working too quick, I'm going to start questioning the quality of the work.
Correct. Yes, they do. Yep.
And so they might go out there and go, oh, yeah, there's a couple of blades of grass out of place, or that edge has got a bit of a wobble in it, or that garden bed doesn't look like it got touched. What's going on?
Correct. And this is where your CRM system from a team's point of view also comes in very handy, because one, they're taking before and after photos of every job, but they also have the ability to put in put in notes and comments, which I encourage. So my guys now need to do different people call it different. We call it a JSCA. So what is it? Job Service. I can never remember the acronym.
I'm not sure with that
What's
one
it
either.
called? SWIMS document, basically.
Yep. Okay.
Um,
JSA or SWIMS.
JSA, sorry, JSA.
Yep.
I added an E in there for some reason, but they've now got to write a story, and I don't mean today I got to see Grandpa Joe. I actually want a story of what they've done. So when I look at the photos, I can actually read that what they've this let's call it a story on the JSA, and actually match up. So when I do get the phone call, and unfortunately we do, I can go back in there and go, oh, hang on a minute, no, they were on site for, they did this, and this, and here are the photos, and they go, oh, okay, yep, fair enough.
Yep.
And that's what.
And I think
so
that's
running.
good.
Oh, sorry, I'm losing my headset.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. So do you adjust your SWIMS or your JSAs for the type of risks that people are doing each time they're there as well? Then.
So we've got set pro formas. So we've got a couple of companies that have their own that I've sent off to ServiceMate, and they've basically developed the form for me and put it into Service, so it's all electronic.
Okay.
So
Nice.
they do it all through the CRM system. So there's no there is no external paperwork that the team have to do. It's all in the system. Whether it's
Yep. So you can teach your team member once, don't stick your hand under the guard in the lawnmower there while it's switched on. And then every time they do a job, the JSA says this is something that the staff members know how to operate safely.
Correct. Yep. And then the other thing that we've actually developed and we've got, but I haven't uploaded it into ServiceMate yet as knowledge documents, is all the safe operating procedures. So we've presented that to the team a while ago and continually do those, but we can actually upload all those documents. Not that I'll be honest with you, I don't expect them to look at it, but at least they're there in case they do have an issue. A prime example, we had a toolbox talk on Monday around a number of different things, and I was saying to the team, look, if you need to take out the wood chipper because we've got a big 7-inch for me wood chipper, then just do it. But I thought, oh, hang a minute, I'll ask the question: do you guys know how to use it? And I know a couple of the teams do, and one of the teams that I knew that didn't said, yeah, no, we know how to use it. I said, okay, no, you don't. We'll do some training. So
Yep. Yes, that's great to hear because I've had to deal with that exact issue. And I would say, for the most part, a JSA will include some SOPs, some standard operating procedures on there, but they're not super detailed. And the risk is that you might have on your JSA in ServiceMate that everyone's trained and up to speed with that. But if you've got two teams that are out there that know what to do, and then you're just trying to do the administration side on yourself, you got to double check these things and make sure you know who's qualified, who's trained, and who's not, so that you don't overstep that. Because it'd be very easy to send off a JSA. The commercial sites ask for JSAs a lot of the time, and it says, "Oh yeah, everyone's trained," but are they?
Correct. Are they? Yes. And sometimes that does get overlooked. So you need to be across that part. Definitely.
Another one on commercial sites you'd probably come across. I've seen this is, do you have the white card? Because a commercial site won't typically have construction on it, but often they do.
It's interesting. I've done my white card because I had to do it for one of the particular clients, but have never ever been asked for it. Police checks, yes. Childcare. What's the word? Working with children checks.
Yep.
That's all standard. But white cards, no, not so much.
It comes up. I'll tell you that. Don't ask me how I know.
I believe you. I do.
Yeah, this is interesting because we're talking a lot about documentation here and the importance of having the right documents so that the expectations are spelt out in writing, and not just expectations, but also the ability to follow up on those things. The CRM is so invaluable when it comes to this, and particularly in terms of your daily reporting from the CRM, so you can then go back over it and make sure that people have the right things for each job that they're doing, but also that that little thing you mentioned, there's a before and after photo for every job that they've done, so you can then review that.
Correct. Yep, 100%. And we've set expectations now with the CRM that it needs to. Well, they complete it anyway, but it needs to be completed after every job. They log in as soon as they get there. So again, we timestamp. We can work out how long they're on job sites, and it's not around micromanaging. It might sound like it, but it's not. It's around scheduling more so. So so I know that when they get to that job next time that okay, I need to allocate less time or more time or whatever the case may be instead of overloading them, which we tend to do in springtime.
Now, you know how I mentioned people in our industry, generally speaking, they're technicians and they're pretty black and white. This is the way we do things and this is why we do it because we're technical and this is how we make sure that our customers are happy. But I made the mistake of sitting down with my son and talking to him about what a CRM does and the fact that how good it is for me as a boss to be able to use a CRM. And he's like, you can't do that. You can't track your employees' movements and expect them to be okay with that. I'm like, why not? And he's black and white thinking and 21 now, so he was probably 19 at the time that I first sat down and said, oh, this is what a CRM does, and I think it's a great idea. I should use it with all my employees. How would you feel, Isaac, if you were working with me and I was tracking you with GPS tracking? So, yeah.
Well, interesting comment. I haven't had that, fortunately. I've got probably a bit of an older workforce, but I've never had an issue. What I do find now is that the teams actually track each other to see where they are and how they're going. So it actually becomes a bit of a inter-team rivalry, which is interesting. But no, I haven't had the issue with tracking. But then again, there's tracking in vehicles and machinery and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's part and the parcel. Plus, I can track. Well, if you've got it on your phone, I could probably track you on your phone now.
Well, if you're running ServiceMate from your phone, then you can use the GPS tracking to start and stop the logging of the jobs.
Correct. Yeah. So the ServiceMate, the tracking portion is extremely useful. Not that we've had to use it, but if you do have a permanent office person, as an example, that's scheduling your work and taking calls during the day, and there's an urgent job, then they can work out where the teams are on that dispatch board and send out. But again, we haven't had a need for that, but others may.
After inviting Sortscape in to share how their software can help your business, we created a link for you to be able to support Aussie Lawn Stars when you join. Sortscape will save you time and effort with scheduling, quoting and reporting so you can build a more efficient business. Visit sortscape.com/lawnstars now to join, and thank you for your support.
I was listening to John Pajak. He's an American guy, Profits with Pajak he goes by, on his own podcast. He was talking this week about having an issue with his employee not turning up and then checking the GPS tracking on the company vehicle because the employee had a company truck, took it home. And the guy had racked up 300 miles on the weekend. Miles, not kilometres.
Yeah.
Travelling back and forth between clubs, pubs and strip joints.
Yeah, right. So okay.
He went and found the employee on the day he was supposed to be at work when he'd not called in sick, just hadn't turned up, off his face, drunk at a club.
There you go. And then if you had it in writing through your employment contract, that's an instant dismissal. Bang.
Well, and it was. He literally had a spare key for the truck and he took the truck, didn't allow the employee to drive it. It's like, go on.
Very cool. Wow.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these things do happen. So, we talk around, and I talk around a lot that, all my I've had a lot of great employees. I've had a couple of duds in the past too, unfortunately.
It happens.
It does. So, putting employees on, just going back to that, is an awesome part of what I find as running a business. There's a lot of satisfaction, that sort of stuff, but you do need to be selective and going back to your recruitment process at the very start. When you're putting these people, and that plays a big important role in making sure you're getting the right people.
Yeah, for sure. And if you spend time recruiting an employee rather than just, you showed up, handshake, you've got the job, then it helps to use that as a filtering process.
It does. And look, we can't always do that. I get the industry, and I get that sometimes, we just need a body.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I get that, and we've been in that situation where we've just put on the body, and they've lasted for a little while, but after a while they tend to not fit in with the team. But if you can spend the time, if you've got the time, on the recruitment process, and you could look, Chat GPT, lose my voice, is your
Yeah.
best mate. I use that for
And grab a
everything now.
drink.
So if you put in there that you wanted, I'm looking for this person, and can you come up with some recruitment questions, with a bit more detail? It'll spit it all out for you. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Well, I've listened to Mike Andes quite a bit. He has spent a lot of time teaching people about recruiting when it comes to start running a lawn care and landscaping business in the US. And the same kinds of recruiting questions you might throw at somebody if you're running 1,000-employee business, he applies to a small-scale landscaping and gardening business. And it's like if you invest the time going, okay, did this person actually respond and provide their resume? That shows they're interested. Did this person participate actively when you returned, like when you gave them a phone call to follow up? And did they actually turn up when you said come for a training day? You can get from that process alone through about 6 or 7 steps. You can exclude 99% of people that don't bother putting the effort in. And then you go, okay, you're coming in for a training day or a trial period. And I believe you can do a trial period for up to 3 months, is it right?
Correct.
So it gives you a lot of leeway to be able to assess somebody's interest and ability and willingness.
Probation, I think, is what they call it. So you can put them on a probation for 3 months.
Yeah.
But talking about those recruitment questions, I was a manager for a recruitment firm back in the day, prior to my banking days.
Okay.
So the question, and another, I'm also on the board for Landscape Victoria in Victoria, and we recently recruited for the CEO. Well, 12, probably just over 12 months ago. The questions we were asking, when I was in recruitment and when we were recruiting the CEO, are more or less a little bit different, but more or less the same questions that I'm asking an unqualified gardener. They're all behavioural based. They're all, how would you cope in this situation, whatever the case may be. But it doesn't matter if you're recruiting for, someone that's earning $500,000 a year or someone that's earning $40,000 a year. They're generally the same, more or less.
Yeah, for sure. And those are the things you want to know. Like you filter for people who are not reliable.
Correct.
You filter, and after reliability, you start to filter for skills and personality and relationship style questions.
Yeah, personality is a big one. For us, it is anyway. They've got to fit in with the team. If they don't fit in with the team, then that's obviously not going to work. So,
for sure.
And if if you're a solo operator moving into the next level, then they have to fit in with you.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You can go through a lot of steps to try and make sure you've got the right person. From the recruiting through to all of the systems you put in place to make sure that it's clear communication and expectations. But one of the things that I see come up is if you're starting on your own and you get to the point where you're too busy, then you're likely to put on an offsider. We don't call them an employee, we'll call them an offsider. And we'll put them on just through the busy period. And then once it slows down, we'll get rid of them again. That ebb and flow is likely to stay that way when your business is built on just word of mouth.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So you would have gone through this because you started as a gyms and you built up a few employees before you left working as a gyms franchise and went to Blue Ridge.
We did. Yep.
So with gyms, you've of course got a funnel bringing more work in. But even then, that may not be enough, right? If you've got one, just yourself, it might be enough to just keep it going. But if you've built up to 2 or 3 teams at the stage that you're still there, then you'd be starting to look outside of that work that's available through gyms leads and going, okay, how can I make sure I'm bringing in enough work to keep everybody busy or to keep growing the business at 5% through to 50% growth, whatever you might deem to be manageable, while you focus on the other aspects of the business.
Yeah, well, great point. Actually, great topic. So when we started as a gyms, we bought, I think it was 30 customers to start with, and we relied heavily on the leads coming through. And I think because we were new, we're at the top of the food chain, and we got more leads than what others did. But we soon learnt very quickly, and again, that may have been a bit of business acumen that I've bought from previous life, but is that we just couldn't rely on one source of lead generation, being gyms at that point in time. So what I did is just quickly is I don't know if you can do this anymore. We touched on this before. With the gyms franchise, is I downloaded all the customers that had reached out to that particular franchise, that were successful and unsuccessful in terms of becoming a customer, and I just started emailing those people and saying, "Hey, look, I'm the new guy. If you need anything, let me know." That started to develop. We got a fair bit of work out of there, and then networking. I really started to network within the other gyms franchises, so pest control, electric test and tag, computers, whatever else there was at the time. It's changed now since I've left, but and we started to actually form our own little networking group and started generating leads through there. We then picked up our first commercial client, which is when I the light bulb went off and thought, hang on a minute, this is where I want to be. So I really started to door knock. We did letterbox drops. We did all those sort of things which helped generate work. And to the point where we got enough commercial clients that we started to then back off the. I started to then back off the, not the networking, but the lead follow up. The lead generation stuff.
Yeah,
and we started to rely on word of mouth, which has been awesome for the last couple of years. And I'll be honest with you, hand on heart, this year, it's been a bit of an eye opener for me. Is that we've probably relied too heavily on word of mouth and haven't focused on putting together a proper marketing strategy for us at the business where we are at the moment, which is what I'm developing as we speak. And developing a marketing strategy to generate more clients in the areas that we want. Lead generation.
I think if you're targeting residential customers, then lead generation is reasonably straightforward for our industry. But if you're targeting a lot of commercial work, then there's a bunch of ways that those commercial customers are likely to be looking for a new contractor that are outside of the scope of what your typical lead generation will find.
Yeah, there's a lot of gatekeepers in the commercial segment, I find.
Yep.
That you've got to get through those people. So, my advice to anyone that if you've got any commercial contracts and you're wanting to develop them, is use the ones that you've got and really start to continually communicate with those people, because they talk to others. But you've got to be in their face, not in a nasty way, but you have to be in their face. Daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. Monthly is probably too much. Too less. But going back to residential, like things like letterbox drops worked great for us. We talked about this before. You've got what's his name? Casey
Devine.
Devine's doing it and does it well. So we did something very similar back in the day with letterbox drops, and we'd service one client, and then we'd either letterbox drop the whole suburb, the surrounding area, or the couple that are close by, and that generated a lot of work.
Yeah, so that's a very targeted letterbox drop, right? Where you go, okay, we want customers that are peripheral to where we're already working, so either same street, same suburb, or with very narrow geographical area. An alternative is to go, okay, let's widen that a little bit and go, okay, if we want to take on more work in a particular area, we could do a letterbox drop for an entire suburb and go, let's hope that we build up a day or a week of work in that particular area. But I guess that's easy enough with residential jobs. Letterbox dropping on commercial clients is probably not going to get the same results.
To be honest with you, it's probably a waste of time. I've got a commercial factory where we run everything out of, and I've got a letterbox there I haven't opened for probably 6 years, to be quite honest with you. So I don't even know what's in there because I don't
Yeah.
have anything that's addressed to the factory. And if it is, it's just
Yeah.
rubbish. So I
Yep.
think letterbox dropping for commercial clients is probably not the value of money that you want.
And like you said, there's gatekeepers. If you are chasing that kind of work, there's going to be a lot of gatekeepers. You've got to find out from say a factory, for instance. Like you're saying, you've got a commercial site, but a factory that's producing goods, they probably got various different managers that handle different things, or they might even sub out to an external manager for those sorts of services.
Correct, yeah. So you'd normally find on those commercial sites there'll be a plaque at the front which will give you an idea of if they've subcontracted out the management services, and they'd usually have, because I think by law they may have to actually, but there's usually a plaque out the front. Just give them a call. So hey, look,
Yeah.
I drove past this property. It looks pretty ordinary at the moment. Are you happy for me to send you through a quote? They can only say no.
Yeah.
Mm. But it
Yeah.
does take a bit of work. It does take a bit of
I think
commitment.
in that situation where there's a plaque there, that's probably a strata type service that manages it, similar to residential strata, but for commercial premises.
Exactly the same. Yep.
Yeah. In some instances, you'll have strata services that look after properties that are commercial. In other instances, you might have a tender process where the business itself or a government agency will put it out to tender. And so finding or knowing where to find tenders for commercial work is another avenue that can help.
It's not an easy one, that one. the
No,
old tender
it's not.
process.
Yeah. It's not. And typically it's going to larger businesses than what you or I are running.
Uh, yes and no. So I'm finding with the tenders at the moment, yes, they are going to some of the bigger businesses, but they're also going to the ones that are able to absorb, which again tends to be the bigger ones.
Yeah.
And this is again just my recent experience. Absorb the lower rates. So you might be doing
Yes.
lawns at what is it, 6 cents per square meter, as an example.
Yeah.
Or things like that. So yeah, so tenders are great and they all sound really pretty, but they are hard work
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
in. Once you're in, you're generally okay, but they're hard work. There's a lot of, again, come back to documentation, which we talked about before. There's a lot of
Yep.
documentation involved where you do need to show proof of sometimes employment contracts,
Yeah.
the ability to, your financial status, all these sorts of things within this tender sorted.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are tenders. I know there are tenders out there that they will look for you or me because they know that the quality of work is going to far exceed what they will get when they're paying 6 cents per metre.
Correct. Yes. And
So
there are
some
those.
will.
Some will. I haven't come across too many, unfortunately, but I know they are out there. There's another
Yeah.
chap I speak to. He gets approached quite a bit by different companies to tender or to put in a price for for contracts that come about. So I'm yet to find those people
Yeah.
in terms of getting in contact with them, but I will.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 guys I've interviewed in WA that focus on chasing tenders. There's a couple in New South Wales I've spoken to that chase tenders as well. But yeah, and I think a lot of those businesses, their success rate comes down to being able to offer a better service than what they'll get from a larger business.
Yep. And we've gone in with that on a number of tenders. The unfortunate thing is we've been struck out on price. So we've got through everything, and they've said, look, we actually really like the company and what you do and yada yada yada. It's your price. So it's like, okay. But again, it's all learning. So you sort of get struck down and you take it on the chest and you learn from it basically and go, right, well, okay, well the next time I'll go in the same or I'll go in a bit cheaper or depending on whatever the case may be.
Now, when you start chasing large commercial sites like that and considering chasing tenders, like you said, there's a lot of paperwork. It's quite a lengthy process to apply for a tender. It's not something where you just go, yep, I like that, put my name in the hat and off you go. You're trying to balance a lot of roles in your business, from manager, employee manager, through to bookkeeping, through to maintenance on the equipment, all different things that as you grow from being solo to having multiple teams and chasing larger work, you start looking at that and going, okay, rather than just having 3 teams of employees out there cutting grass and pruning hedges, putting mulching gardens, I need to have somebody else that takes on some of this other work, whether it's a subcontractor that comes in to do your bookkeeping, or whether you go, no, I actually have enough there that I need to put on an employee to do all of that work.
No, actually, great segue. So one of the things I worked out very early on is I was very shit at accounting. Pardon the French.
All good.
But
It's
I
the
knew
right
what I
language.
was. Yeah, I knew what I was good at, and I knew what I wasn't good at. One of those was bookkeeping, and we lost a bit of money. I think I've talked about this before. So we ended up putting on a bookkeeper. That's morphed now into an admin manager who is a subcontractor, but she works for me. Basically, well, sorry, not basically. She works 5 days a week
For you, yeah.
for us. What I've come to realise is that being as a business owner, you put so many hats on. It's working out what you're good at and what you're not. And if you're not good at it, then get someone that is to do it. It may cost you a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, it saves you a bucket load of money. So by having Rosa, our admin manager, on, she's been a godsend. So she's been with us. Well, I have had a couple actually, but Rose has been with us for the last 4 years, and she's been fantastic. I dread the day that she may decide that one day that she wants to retire or something. Anyway, she's happy at the moment. But I've also found that the things that I'm not good at, things like marketing, not my forte. I'm great at relationship management. I can build relationships with customers. Get me in front of a customer, I'm fine. But the marketing and those sort of things, like social media, is not my thing. I do dabble with different bits and pieces, but we're now going to look at putting on potentially or using a company to develop some promo materials, and we'll look into social medias and things like that. But one of the biggest bits of advice that I tend to give people that ask for it is that if you're not good at it, find someone that is. A prime example of that is retaining walls. I know my retaining walls are not straight, so I don't do them. I subcontract them out.
That's a great
and make
point,
money off
because there's so many jobs which a solo person will go, yeah, I can do all of those jobs. But when you've got a team out there that specialises in cutting grass or gardening, and you go, okay, maybe I need a team that does grass and a team that does gardens, and then another team that does softscaping or planting out, you start going, well, do any of them have the skills to do retaining walls? Or do I really want to waste their skills pressure cleaning a driveway? Do I just subcontract that to another business, or do I set up another team that does that specialty work? But the one I think, and I'm thinking you've got one, is just a maintenance mechanic that can come in and service your equipment.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I was going to get to that. So we put on believe it or not, another friend of mine. I said, don't work with family or friends. So I've got my father and my brother, and I've got another mate. But he's a 65-year-old retired mechanic, and was a concrete pumper. So he came in specifically to do some the slashing work that we do. So I put him out on the slasher. But anyway, he's a qualified mechanic. So as of recent, we've actually pulled him off the tools, and one day a week he's in the factory, doing maintenance. He's servicing vehicles. He's fixing machinery, doing all that sort of stuff. Has saved me an absolute fortune in terms of things being off the road, mechanical invoices, that you tend to get overpriced, for servicing and things like that. So he's again.
If you've got a large ride-on mower that's out of action for a week, you're potentially taking an employee out because that's their job and they don't have another job they can go to. You've taken the equipment out and you've taken all those customers out while you get that ride-on fixed. And the mower shop is saying, yeah, it's going to take me at least a week before I can look at it. And that's if they're good.
Correct.
If they're looking after you. So if you've got your maintenance manager there, you call him and say, hey, we need to do a gearbox change on the mower. then that becomes top priority. Fit it in around the other jobs that you need to have done and the staff that you've got available. Whole lot easier than if you're sending it off to the mower shop.
Or you've got to have machinery that sits in the in the factory that's just ready for something to break down so they can take that out, which is a huge cost, which you don't want.
Yeah, and I can imagine a little bit of both is going to work best, right? So equipment that's not overly expensive, you can probably afford to have a spare Honda 216 sitting in the shop, but you probably don't want to have a spare $80,000 Toro real mower sitting in the shop.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. You want everything that you've got in that's worth a bit of coin, that's sitting in the factory or shop or whatever, out working. You want that generating an income. Otherwise, it's just costing you. There's no point being the best person out there with the biggest toys, and none of us getting used.
I got told that earlier this year when I had a mechanical failure on my ride-on mower, and it's like, oh yeah, you should just have a spare 61-inch mower sitting there because you're a business.
Yeah. That's great, isn't it? It's interesting. Like we do actually have a spare machine at the factory, and it's purely because it's been paid off. It's an older machine, but it does sit there. So if the guys do have a mechanical failure, we do have the luxury of putting the old machine back into service. We try not to do that too much because she's pretty clapped out. But not a lot of people have that luxury, unfortunately, because it's an expensive thing to have just sitting around. That's
right, and it's one thing if you've got an old one that's not worth reselling. It's another thing if you don't have that and you're like, well, do I buy another one that's $15,000, $40,000?
Efficiency is the thing that rules a business and the decisions you make as a small business owner. Right Mowers give you the options in their product lineup to match efficiency with size, fuel usage, and the type of jobs you want to target, from catching to mulching or side discharge, from roadside verges to acreages, and manicured lawns to 6 feet tall and super long. I've been using the Right Stander I 42-inch with a Catch Pro for manicured areas and the Stander ZK61 to maximise productivity for large open acreage mowing. If you need to replace your push mower, try the 32-inch Stander B. If you have more open access to residential properties, there's a 42 through to 48-inch option that suits you. And if you want to enter the acreage market, the 52, 61 and 72-inch machines have choices in engine size and model type to suit the work you want it to do. Right Standards go the distance, saving you time and money, season after season.
Look, it is it's the end of financial year, so maybe that's an option for someone. But
I think at the moment you got to keep that purchase under $20,000, right?
Correct. Well, I think so. Yes.
So if you're buying a ute, see if you can buy a second-hand ute. If you're buying a mower, see if you can get it under $20,000.
Actually, we just bought a new Great Wall, just completely off the topic, and that's been a great little car.
Yeah. Okay.
Cheap, easy to run.
Yeah, awesome. I think I've heard hit and miss stories when it comes to some of the brands, the cheaper brands of utes around at the moment in terms of get really good value out of them, or they're nothing but trouble.
Yeah, touch wood, nothing. We've had no issues with it, but it serves a purpose and does what it needs to do. But yeah. Sorry, complete change of topic there.
No, that's good. And relevant, because that's what we're talking about, is getting the equipment in the background that's going to keep you working.
Yeah, and you want your team. So if you if you're running people, you do not want them standing around. So one of the things we have an issue with, not an issue, is if we have a wet day, let's just call it a wet timetable. So very rarely are we all in the factory on a wet day, because there are things you can do, and I do generally send the teams out on a wet day. However, they have the they can control their day, if that makes sense. So if it is bucking with rain, then I've basically said to them, guys, you make the call. If it's too wet, then you come back and you do maintenance on your machines. So there's a bit of autonomy with the team leaders or crew leaders there. But wet days are not great, particularly when you're running teams.
Yeah, and I think if you've got just yourself and an offsider, it's probably more manageable. But when you've got several teams there, yeah, you're literally going, it's not just 8 hours, it is 8 hours times 14 people.
Correct. Yes.
So the fortunate thing is most years you only have sort of 3 to 5 days a year where you call it and you go, yeah, it's too wet. Or your employees in your situation go, yeah, it's too wet for us to work.
Yep. Correct. There's not many.
This last growing season, which we've just finished at the moment, I think we had more wet days than I can ever remember on any other growth season.
Actually, you're right. Sorry, now if I'm thinking of you northern states, then unfortunately, yeah, you guys have really copped it.
You've been
right.
in drought. We've been in flood, and you've been in drought.
Correct. Yeah, South Australia, South Australia more than Victoria, but yeah, we've definitely been in drought. Feeling it. So, and the machines are feeling it too. Because they're not getting or they haven't been getting the attention that they would normally get during this year or the lead up.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors come into that, isn't there? When you've got a lot of wet grass, it's going to have one impact on on the machine. When you've got a lot of dry conditions, you end up with a lot more dust getting in the bearings, in the air filters, all those areas that are problematic.
Well, you're right, but we also don't have the downtime. So because we're being constantly out, the guys. You sort of look forward to a rain day every now and then, just so you can pull a bit of machinery off and do a bit of a TLC. But they've just been constant. So yeah, there's been a few breakdowns as of recent, but again, all quick fixes.
Yeah, that's good. Good that you can fix them easily. But yeah, it's not fun when you don't have time to prepare and prevent.
Correct. So as a boss, I do look forward to a rain day every now and then. Plus, you get to take the team out for lunch or whatever the case may be, and have a bit of a bonding session.
Yeah, that's always handy. It's good if you got a nice bar or restaurant you can go to for a meal.
Yeah, we tend to do a breakfast every quarter. We've got a little. Well, we did have it, just burnt down, but we had a place where we go every once a quarter.
Yeah,
and take the team out and have a brekkie and bit of a catch up, and then they all went off to work.
Yeah, so you just need to find somewhere new for breakfast now.
We do. That'll accommodate 14 people and the size of the trucks and trailers where I've got to park.
Yeah. So, Matthew, we've covered quite a lot of topics that are relevant to having employees working for you, having teams working with you, and how to manage that, or the pros and the cons of it. One of the things that is bound to come up once you start going, okay, we've got these extra things we've got to deal with as a business with more than 2 people working there, is the need to have the different specialties that you cater for. So somebody who can do your bookkeeping, somebody who can do your maintenance. And along with those issues as they arise, a lot of people, and for me, this happened with just having one employee, but for you, you'd probably come across it as well, is when you get to that point where you go, am I getting ahead of myself? Are some of these things exceeding capacity? Do I need to pull back, or am I drowning because of that? And, I'm thinking of different things like, have I put on an employee when I don't have enough work for them? Or do I need to put on an employee because I'm so flat out that I don't have time to actually even do the interviews or put the job ad out?
Well, funnily you mentioned that because that happened to us last year. So we got to a point where we were 19 staff in total, and our expenses were just exorbitant in terms of they were huge, and we were turning $1, but not a great So for the output that I was getting from those 19 people, it was okay, but it wasn't great. So we did a bit of a restructure last year and actually had to take a step back and go, righto, we've got all these people on. What are they doing? This is the workload. Can we do that with less? So unfortunately, we had to make the decision. And again, it was just a business decision. It wasn't personal to any of the staff. But in the end, we had to move on five employees in total, which included my son as well at the time. So he got into the Navy, so that's a different thing. But it did include my son that we had to downsize. Now, what we found, I was only talking to the accountant this afternoon, is that our profit or our income has more or less stayed the same, which has been great.
Yeah.
But our profit's gone through the roof because our expenses have dropped absolutely, dramatically, which has been fantastic. But we had to, and it was the hardest thing as a business owner to go up to someone and say, mate, we just don't have the work. We need to let you go. It was shit.
That'd be real rough because you got to let go of somebody that is financially supporting their family by working for you.
It was the hardest thing.
Yeah. In the background, you're now getting from the accountant, hey, you can afford to take a European holiday. Just be careful which city you're flying in and out of with the current climate.
I wish he told me that, but he didn't. But you're right. It was the hardest thing that I've had to do within the business is to let those people go. And I worked with them. So the four of them, or let's say three of them, because one of them was son. We moved into other businesses, so they were able to move in. One moved into a local council role. The other one wanted to be a landscaper, moved into there, and the other one moved to another company. My son moved off to the Navy. The final one, which I'd kept on because I had a very soft spot for this particular person. We helped him recover from alcoholism and all sorts of things. So we supported him through there, but we just had to make the decision. And it wasn't personal or anything like that, but we just had to make the call from a business. That was the hardest, where I had to hand him a letter and say, look, we don't have the work for you, unfortunately, anymore. So, here's your payer. And that was awful. But anyway, at the end of the day, it had to be made. And as the accountant and a few other people said, it's not personal. It is all about business. It's either you keep paying them and you go under, or you lose your house, you lose everything because everything's tied into the business, or you rip the Band-Aid off, make the hard decision, and move on.
That is a really hard one, and I want people to hear this from the genuine heartache that you've gone through, and I know what you're talking about. They say that CEOs are narcissists, and that's typically a good way to identify a CEO is that they're very narcissistic. And I think it's true, but I think the counter argument is not everybody is like Donald Trump. A lot of CEOs, and I've said this to my own employees, I've said my business doesn't operate if I can't be narcissistic in making decisions. I'm not a narcissist myself. At least I hope I don't get seen as a narcissist. But my business has to come first. If my business is not profitable and viable, I don't have a job for you. So if we're talking about how that job looks, it's got to be something that makes the business work well first and foremost. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, so we've talked about this with the team, whether they've listened to it or not, but I do continue to talk about it, is that if we do happen to lose, we've got a number of contracts, and I use one in particular. So if we do happen to lose this particular contract, not that we are, or it's looking that way, but if we do that and we muck it up, it basically means that one of you guys in the room won't have a job. That sounds really harsh, sounds hard, but at the end of the day, that's the truth and that's the reality that we're in. We don't have the flexibility as small business owners to absorb a lot of things. We can absorb a little bit, and we do. A prime example is winter. We tend to absorb a lot of the costs over winter, and then that gets covered over the busier periods. But we just can't. So we've been pretty open and honest with the whole team around that sort of stuff.
I think it's really important for people starting a business to consider this, is that the business needs to achieve certain things, or there's no point being in business. And that means that, like when you get on an aeroplane and they say, here's how to use a life jacket, make sure you put your own life jacket on before you try and help somebody else. It's the same with your business. Make sure you've got the business life jacket on, because even you as the manager of the business will go under if the business doesn't float.
Yep, correct. And it's very easy to fall in that bucket where you try to help, and I'll be honest, I've been there and probably still there to a degree. Is that you still try to help everybody, that you're supporting, but it does get to the point where you have to, put that, that take the nice hat off and put the business hat on, and be a prick.
Yeah, that's it. That's the way it goes.
Mm.
Well, look, I think we've probably flooded people with information around employees and teams and management decisions. I want to say I'd really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me again. I know it does takes you away from the things you need to be doing, but hopefully it's helping other people.
That's right. More than happy to have a chat, and hopefully it does help. I appreciate you letting me on.
Look, there's a few people that I have gone, I need to talk to twice in doing this podcast, and I think we get more value out of you every time we talk to you.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.